Hi, I'm Leah Wilson, Executive Director of Stand for Health Freedom, a nonprofit that protects basic human rights, primarily informed consent, and the climate for our future generation. I have a super special guest with me here today. It is Mr. Marc Thielman. He is the superintendent of Alsea School District in Oregon, and he has been a school administrator for 15 years. And it is time during this climate, during this public crisis, that we hear from our school administrators, from our educators, and from people like Mr. Thielman about what they see going on with the COVID restrictions and with the effect on our children. So, Mr. Thielman, it is noteworthy that he has kept his schools open throughout the entire public crisis. So it's my understanding, and I'll give him a chance to talk to this too, that he has not closed his school throughout COVID-19. And he also launched a new statewide, no cost program this fall called Learn at Home Oregon for students that choose to learn from the comfort of their home and wish to have a more balanced approach than most of our at-home students are getting, sitting in front of Zoom calls for hours and hours a day as young people. So thank you so much, Mr. Thielman, for agreeing to join us and talk about the current situation today.
Well, thank you for having me, Leah.
Absolutely. It goes without saying that we are all feeling pressed and challenged in new ways in every role that we play in society right now. And more people are starting to see that a protracted state of emergency is having devastating effects on society. So I really wanted to hear from you as an expert in education about what you're seeing. How have you been able to go against the grain and keep your schools open? One campaign that we're doing right now with Stand for Health Freedom is the older adults, the vulnerable population that we're all supposed to be protecting, asking their lawmakers to lift the restrictions. And they're speaking up as the ones that are reportedly being protected, saying, don't do this for us because we can clearly see that the destruction it costs too much for what we're trying to avoid. So what have you seen, Mr. Thielman, as a school administrator with the effects on Oregon's children with school closure and on, the town and the business closures even on these students in your state?
Well, it's been absolutely devastating. So just the context is last spring when the shutdown happened, and of course it was a nationwide, obviously, and we were a school district just like anyone else, and we said, okay, we're going to close down, and then when we never opened. And so being a small school district, all of our students have devices, so we started delivering meals, and we took computers to everybody, and we went ahead and converted to what they called comprehensive distance learning here in Oregon, weeks ahead of any mandate to do so. And so we did some. We kind of just started ahead of the curve. We dropped off toilet paper when it was scarce to people, because it turns out commercial toilet paper was in great supply because no one was buying it. And so we did crazy, insane things. We dropped off card games, and we visited homes. And if a student got on their computer and was rude to the teacher, myself or my principal would drive to that house and visit with the parents and the student. And like I told my administrators, everything we do during this crisis, every action we take, we have to engage in a manner that maintains the confidence of our parents in us and our school district. And so that's why we did out of the box things like delivered meals.
So you initially, you did not stop educating for any days, but you had to go, quote unquote, to distance learning, keeping the community aspect strong with that human touch. When you saw a kid that had a behavior need or a family that had a physical need, that's amazing. How did you respond to the closures in the fall then? Did your students come back in person this fall?
Well, the conflict started actually, that prior spring, because we were already open for distance learning, and then the state mandated it. And we had already communicated how grades would be administered, and we had a provision where, if a student was failing, we would give letter grades for A or B, and then we'd give a pass. And then the state came out and said, you can't give any letter grades. So anyway, but by then I already had parents motivated and students motivated by grades. So we ended up giving A's and B's. We're the only district in Oregon to do so. And when they tried to tell me I couldn't upload that information, I said, well, P is a grade and it's a letter. So from the get-go, we've been kind of in a weird place, kind of on our own, and kind of at the forefront of how to do or how to manage this crisis in a way that keeps learning or out front the whole time and keeps connections with kids out front the whole time. So in the fall, there was just no option to be anything but open. And things looked pretty good. And then they administered here in Oregon what was called county metrics or school metrics. And the metrics were so restrictive that no school could open. It was ridiculous. And so again, because I'm legislatively connected, calls went out, and we had some Republican senator in particular named Senator Finley, who set up phone calls with Governor Brown, and loud voices were heard, and they created what's called a safe harbors or rural school exception. And so, ta-da, we're a small rural school. So guess what? We opened, and we opened without any thought of not opening. And in the 3-county area of our region, we were the only school that opened K-12.
Wow. And what do you say to the schools who see other barriers? Let's say we're not rural. Can we find a way to open? I mean, it sounds like you made the decision to open, and then you found the avenue because you thought that was what's best for your children, I assume.
Well, we made the decision to open. We wanted to be open for in-person instruction for our K-12 brick and mortar. We're a charter school, so we draw kids from 9 surrounding communities within a 60-mile radius. 2 of them are large urban areas, Eugene and Corvallis in particular. So we also had the issue of, we're drawing out of 3 counties because it crosses county lines, Lane County, Lincoln County, Benton County, and actually 4 because we had a few from Lynn. And so how can we do that? Because we're running buses everywhere. And so that created a real issue because we knew as a school district, because of that diverse community of kids that we draw, that we would have a higher potential to have COVID cases imported. And so the risks were huge. And just so everybody that may view this understands, up until 2 weeks ago, we had no liability protection for school districts. So we were also opening up without any liability or lawsuit protection, not even from our own insurance company. And we did it anyway.
And so what have you found with opening with 3 counties coming into your brick and mortar buildings? Have you found that you're a super spreader school, that there's been a lot of high risk with your population there?
Well, that's the conundrum because, we're now into January and we opened in August 24th. And so from August to now, we've had absolutely 0 cases of COVID that could even be closely or remotely traced to the school. I've had a couple staff members that have had COVID. Ironically, all of their cases were tied to some other source besides working at the school. 0 staff have gotten COVID from working here. And there is no question that the Oregon Health Authority noted that, partly because we kept telling them.
Yes. And being in close touch with the Oregon Health Authority and with your county local public health departments, I'm sure is key for your success. So have you had to keep them in close touch or to satisfy them in certain ways? How have you navigated that?
Well, it's interesting because we've always had a open relationship with our county government, but it hasn't always been, civil. Because county governments can have a lot of idiosyncratic nuances. So planning department of the county could be a lot easier to work with than the health department. But rather than work with all 4, I was telling my crew that we're gonna focus on our home county of Benton, and we're only gonna work with 1 authority. We'll keep the others in the loop. And our local Benton County people have been outstanding. I mean, they've just been incredible. But what was funny is they're not educators and we're not health experts. So, and then the way the state set up, or the Department of Education in Oregon set things up, they said you're required to do what's called a blueprint based on guidance for COVID mitigation. But the Department of Education isn't going to approve it because they don't want the liability. So nothing like a vote of confidence from the people setting policy. So they passed it off to the counties, and then the county lawyers got involved, and the county lawyers said, we're not going to approve these plans either, but so I suggested that they just review them and that their experts can give feedback. And then I just said, we as the school district will accept the liability, but we are asking for our plan to be reviewed and for the county to be in contact with us and help us with any questions we might have. And that kind of became the blueprint here in Oregon. It's worked pretty well in all 37 counties I think we have.
Wow, that's amazing to hear, because it's quite the opposite of what the murmurings across the nation are to pass the buck, to say, well, the public health department has become the primary expert in every facet of life. And so the health department is governing our country, even though they, like you said, are not experts in education or child development or running a business. And so I love hearing that you were able to, because you had the desire to, remain the expert in your school and to not accept that the health department now replaces you as the expert in your school. So that's,
well, and I really appreciate, I didn't mean to cut you off. I really appreciate the way you said that. And I know I smile sometimes because you just outed me. That was the outcome I had hoped for, because if we are accepting liability, it leaves us in charge.
that's right. And you're willing to take on that liability. A lot of people do not have the stomach to accept liability, because we're in a culture where we're supposed to shirk liability or pass off liability instead of assume responsibility, which is, some would argue, is one of the major problems that's gotten us here, is a lack of personal responsibility. So what do you think you've seen in Oregon, 3 counties coming into your school, to your brick and mortar? You haven't seen a COVID issue. You've seen your kids do better there from what I've heard from you. So what is keeping the larger school districts from even wanting to open and from wanting to get the teachers and the students all back to school full time?
Now, that's a great question. It's a really good question, and I want to make sure that I answer it in a way that's productive. There is a style of leadership that's prevalent in Oregon school districts, based on the way that our state is structured, that works well when we don't have a COVID crisis like this. And it's more of a management style and more of a compliance style, and making sure that the district's following all the protocols it needs to have. And then something comes along like COVID and it throws all that out of whack. So people who have spent their careers knowing what to do suddenly don't know what to do. And then when they're told that they won't be protected liability-wise, even by the district's insurance company, it scares them. And it's just, and I'm not here to criticize my colleagues, because truth be told, the first 10 days of our operation, people kept saying, Mark, are you okay? I was like, just please, let's get through 10 days without a COVID case. And when we did, I slept great that week, that weekend. I was like, we made
it. We can do this.
Which means that our mitigation plan and our blueprint is keeping kids from getting infected. And that was a wonderful thing. And so I'm not here to disparage my colleagues. There's other brave ones in Oregon, but not many. And I don't blame those that just said it's just easier to stay closed. And it, to some degree it is. So that's what it is.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you that we are in uncharted territory. So there's a lot of judgment that has to be used. I remember when schools first closed down, even in our area, there was a big focus on things such as meal assistance for these families that were reliant on the district to make sure their kids are receiving proper nutrition. So that kind of lasted through a few weeks to help get them through that little hump. But now that we're in this protracted period of time of an emergency, are you seeing the effect of that on your kids in your school district? Are you hearing about it from your colleagues, or are the families still able to get this sort of assistance?
It's a huge problem, and not for the kids that go to school here. We have all free and reduced. Every kid eats for free. We have kids whose parents have elected to have the child work from home or learn from home, and we do deliveries to them if they need it or want it. What makes us unusual is I said we're going to deliver door to door. Thank God my school board supported that, because a lot of people thought I was crazy. 3 counties and you got all these kids and you're going to deliver door. So we broke everything out into routes. And I said, well, if we do door to door, then what do parents see? They see us caring. They see us following through. And then we can have interaction with the family. How's it going? What do you need? Is your computer working? How's your internet service? We put people on internet service. We traded our bandwidth that we weren't using with providers. We did crazy things. And I think the humorous thing about what you're talking about is I did get a call from, we contract with the school district to provide our meals, and they wanted to know how we had 100% utilization of meal service during the shutdown. And when I told them, well, of course we have 100%, we're delivering it to the house. Other districts weren't doing that, and people weren't coming because they were scared from COVID. So what do you mean I have to leave my house and go to a school site to pick up my meal? Or they had to go to a bus drop-off area. And a lot of parents were like, I'm not doing that. And that's what I'm talking about that relationship. If you don't have the confidence of your parents, and your parents don't like your plan, and they're not confident to leave their house and come to a spot, they're not going to utilize the food. They will go hungry. So that's what we're.
So meal assistance, staying open, expanding your services statewide. What inspired you to make that leap and not just ride the tide like we see a lot of towns and cities doing right now? Do you remember a point in time? Was it last spring, or what inspired you?
Well, I spent, 6 weeks prior to the shutdown sensing that the shutdown was coming. So I studied everything I could about CDC and testing and what I could learn about the coronavirus. And I anticipated that. So we were a little ahead of the curve. I reported to staff. We had a meeting before everybody left. And that momentum has carried us through. And so for me, I wanted to be cutting edge everywhere or at every stage of the game. So we got through the first shutdown. We got the grades in. We went into summer. We weren't going to be able to open. We managed to create a criteria for exceptions to open. And then once that happened, I looked at the sociological data coming out because by then we were in shutdown for 3 or 4 months, issues that families were having. And I said, man, we can't put kids on screens for, say, 7, 8 hours. The CDC is recommending no more than 3. So we created a whole program called Learn at Home Oregon. And I just brought a contractor in. I said, he was trying to peddle his curriculum. And so I called him back in and said, hey, we'll pay you, will you provide your curriculum? It was a K4 curriculum. I said, but I need it to be K8, and can you do it in 2 weeks? So, it was that crazy. And so, that we had 0 kids when we started that program, and now we have nearly 600. And we continue. We onboarded another 4 today, and it continues to grow. And the reason is families like it because the screen time is limited, but they have interactions with teachers. They get to see other kids, and then they still have some paper pencil stuff. So we send home supplies and projects, so they get to do the tactile stuff. And that's what we're seeing from schools that have done everything digitally is parents and kids want things that they can touch. So we've had tremendous success. And it's really about how do we serve families? Tell us about your situation, mom and dad. And we'll even recommend a pathway or a program to them, and depending on what their needs are. And by the way, it's statewide. We got kids from all over Oregon that connect to that program.
Wow, that's pretty amazing that you're able to integrate the hands-on, the community aspect all through the distance learning in this program. And what a blessing there. Do you see the difference in your semester from the spring or now, or what you're seeing with this protracted emergency? what I'm trying to ask you is, what are your concerns with the lasting impacts on these kids? Like, do you feel urgent to get back to life as usual without restriction, without protracted masking
Mhm.
and distance learning, et cetera?
We absolutely have to open up schools. There is no data, no scientific data, no epidemiological data that justifies what we have done to our kids. And appreciate you noticing I was being a little avoidant of saying that. I'll just say it. It is a massive failure of government policy, both from the federal government and from the state government of Oregon, what we have done to kids and families. There is no justification for it. And as evidenced by the fact that we haven't had any COVID cases, and um, the for our brick and mortar, but also our online programs, the stories are the same when families would call us. They'd be just nightmare stories, suicide stories, anxiety, stress. Um, Kids need routine, they need structure, they need to be connected to systems, and all of that's thrown out of whack. And I said it. I wrote a letter to Yamhill County, which was considering opening up against the governor's, kind of defying the governor's shutdown or metric orders or restrictions, I should say. And I was asked by contact of a contact to write a letter, and I wrote a letter. And you never know what's going to resonate with the political world. And I wrote a line that said, student suicides, both attempts, student suicide attempts and suicides are rising at an all-time low. So the rate is going up like we've never seen before. But to date, 0 kids ages 0 to 19 in Oregon have died of COVID. We've not had a single COVID fatality of any citizen age 0 to 19. Why are schools closed?
Wow.
Apparently that resonated with the leadership.
Yes, I don't even want to comment on what you just said, just for the sheer value of the boldness and the leadership that it takes to say it. And how would you encourage people to get involved in their own school districts and their own communities to voice these types of opinions, to ask for the restrictions to be lifted?
That is a tough one because it's not always safe to do so. I mean, let's be honest. I was, I'm in a unique position because I've had plenty of conflicts with state agencies in Oregon because I've done legislative work. And because I've worked with Democrats and Republicans, I also have some credibility and protection. So one option is to find someone like me that you can voice to, because I have listened to people with their concerns, and I have gone on and I've sent their story forward for them. Strongly recommend people do that they find a leader in their community. It could be a church leader, it could be a county commissioner, it could be a water board director, and reach out to people who know people that set policy that can help. The other one too is be voice to your legislators and tell them your story. So important. Even if you don't get the response, I guarantee you they're listening and they're reading. Recently our governor, she was getting very, 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 very hard-handed or heavy-handed. And then out of the blue, she said, okay, everything's advisory and we're going back to local control. And it's thrown everything out of whack. What the world doesn't know is that had a lot to do with myself and a few other key people driving this story. That line I just shared with you, I guarantee you. I called up OHA and said, why are how come the hospitalization rate is going down, but the COVID daily case counts continue to go up at an alarming rate? That's impossible. And the answers were not good. They didn't have them. And I said, look, something's wrong with the data. And well, why are you pushing this, Mark? Well, because I'm trying to make decisions about whether I open my school after Christmas break or winter break. Excuse me, we're not allowed to say that anymore. Winter break. And I need good data in order to do that. See, in Oregon, after January, on the old rules, we no longer had safe harbor. And so I took it very seriously. How do I keep my school open? Well, that involved, I'm going to have to engage in conflict. So I just did. and the results have been good. We're open.
So I heard you mention talk to your legislators, be vocal, share your story. But what do you say to those people who are listening right now that are feeling powerless because of what we've seen in politics?
Oh, well, one, I get it. I mean, I've had those moments myself, but just lean on my experience and testimony. One person is never powerless because we are a nation of individuals. We have never been a collective nation. We're a nation of creed, not group. That's what makes America so awesome. And when I look back at some of the crazy things I've accomplished, whether it's a piece of legislation or a school tax to fund schools, or I've been on all sides of these things. All of that was because I just chose to act as an individual with no results guaranteed. And get active. You never know what sticks. And there is every individual person can access their government and their process. They can go to every legislative session in the state. They can walk right into the Capitol building as an individual without an appointment and start talking to legislative offices and legislators. And you will be surprised that how much you can get done. So please get active. Your story is valuable, and people need to know. They need to hear it.
That's good. And if you are hearing this and you're like, well, maybe I will walk into a legislative office, go to standforhealthfreedom.com and look at our top 10 tips. It's under news and resources. And there are tips there that show you how to approach that sort of interaction and make it easy and palatable for you. Mr. Thielman, I want to ask you before we wrap up, what are your next steps? I've heard murmurings that there might be some big things on the horizon.
Well, I've been doing this for a while, so I'm under a lot of pressure because I attended political rallies, another thing you can do. I made some speeches, and so right now I'm exploring looking at running as a candidate for governor here in Oregon. I kind of threw that out at a speech because I had to stop and have an attorney look at it because I was outing the Department of Education, and I thought, well, I better check with the legal people and make sure I don't say something stupid. And Antifa attacked, and there was this big ruckus as I was being introduced. And so I kind of lost my discipline because the whole thing was so unexpected. So I announced that none of those folks that came in to disrupt this proceeding graduated from Alsea, because I wanted the audience to know that. And then I said, and if this speech is a little convoluted, it's because I had to stop an attorney because I'm considering running for governor. And I didn't want to say anything that would be stupid. And ever since then, it's just been a tsunami of people asking me to do it and to run. So that process is moving forward. I'm hoping it will be successful. And, if I can help, I'm willing to help.
What would be the election year so we could all look forward to following your campaign?
It'd be in 2 years. And for me, like I say, I tend to be a problem solver. And so when I have gone to a whole series of meetings talking to a lot of people that do campaigns, and I was almost laughed at the thing when I started this. I literally was almost laughed at by people that are like, you run for governor? And I said, well, yeah, and here's why I need to run for governor. And then they would throw out issues. And then I would say, well, here would be my position on these issues. And after that, the answer, multiple people would say, I've never heard of that solution before. That's interesting. And so that's, we have to answer the call. If I have something that's interesting or solutions that are innovative, then I'm willing to put myself through that because it makes such a difference for people if you can get it right. If we had gotten COVID policy right, the negative impacts of our desire to fight COVID would have been massively reduced, and we would have been just as effective.
You bring up an interesting point. If we would have gotten COVID policy right, and you are going to be a guest on a panel coming up of experts discussing the top 10 mistakes or 15 mistakes. We're getting all that together now to talk about what we could have done differently and what we don't want to see if there's ever a next time. So you can watch for that and tune in. And then also thank you so much for being an agent of change. And thank you so much for being a champion for children, even if it's at risk to yourself. And I want to encourage people to go to your website, the Learn at Home Oregon, check out what Mr. Thielman is doing, and watch for his campaign for the 2023 Governor of Oregon. So
thank you. And thank you for calling me an expert. That's refreshing. I don't hear that as much as I'd like. So thank you.
Absolutely. We appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Leah.